Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of
The Super Data Brothers Super Show.
That's right, I'm Ryan.
I am Eric.
And we are two real-life plaid-wearing brothers, and have we got a good one for you today, folks.
It's true, Ryan. You know, Ryan, I'm so excited for today's show because we're talking about something we never talk about. No, I'm just kidding. We're talking about something we do sometimes talk about. We're talking about the startup life versus the corporate life.
Ooh.
And I'm at a university, so maybe we'll sprinkle in some university life. And we're talking to an absolute expert on it, Colleen Tartow. It's going to be great.
Yeah, first of all, I will say I have been trying to get Colleen on this show forever. So I'm glad to finally have her on here. I think was it like Data Council or something last time I saw her in person, and it was like, you got to come on the show. And, so to actually finally have her is such a treat. And I really it's actually a decision you're going to have to make at some point if you're in the data world, I think, is, okay, which direction are you headed? You may have that sweet startup opportunity, and it sounds so cool. It's so fast moving, and I'm going to get stock options. And look, that's all true. But, there's some downsides to it too that maybe don't exist in the corporate world. So we're going to go deep on that with Colleen. Now, listen, folks, this is a live show. And what that means is that if you get your questions, comments, reactions into the chat, we will read them to Colleen. We will answer them live. We will shout you out, like for our friend of the show, Tom Wilsek, who's tuning in from Austin. Tom, glad to have you here. Eric and I are headed to Austin this weekend.
Probably.
Maybe for Day-to-Day Texas. Now, for those of you who don't know, Day-to-Day Texas final edition is in Austin this weekend. Eric and I are going. This is by far the best data conference in the United States of the year. It is the one to be at. It's incredible. Every presentation is incredible. You're going to be sad you missed it if you don't go. And this is the last one ever. Now, the downside is there is an ice storm heading towards Texas last time there was a big ice storm in Texas, I think some people didn't have power for like a month. So we're heading down to Austin. As Michiganders, I'm not worried about the ice.
Yeah, we all just bring warm clothing. It's fine.
Exactly. Like, I'm totally ready. Now, I posted something about it on LinkedIn, and a couple people were like, "Oh my God, thank you for posting this," because I was not even going to check the weather. And now, and I'm headed to Austin, and now I know, people from the Bay Area. It's like, bro, do you even have a coat?
They probably don't. No, they have a coat for when it gets to 68 degrees out.
Yeah. Actually, to be fair, in the Bay Area, I go there a lot, and it's literally never nice. Yeah. It's never bad, but it's never nice. So we got Mooplad 5303, healthcare data scientist from Ohio. What conference is this? This is Day-to-Day Texas in Austin this weekend. So if you want to go, you've got to buy a ticket and get a plane now. It's on Saturday and Sunday. We do have a discount code. So if it's something that somehow you can make it to, use code SuperDataBrothers, all one word. You'll get 20% off your ticket. Yep. Tom says it's the only one he goes to now, so no idea what he'll do next year. Come to Data in the D, Tom. That's the obvious answer. All right, enough with the intro. Let's thank our sponsors, Good Data. Next week, January 28th, Good Data has I will be leading a presentation about from legacy BI to AI-ready analytics stack. So what are we going to be talking about? This is a practical path to move beyond your legacy BI and get into a more modern AI-first analytics as code tool like Good Data. And we're going to be showing you actually how to use LLMs and tools like Cursor to take a BI migration from something that might take you infinity time to something that you can actually get a budget approved for. And the reason I say that is because, listen, over the course of my career, I've been involved in planning probably 100 BI migrations and executing 1.5. And the reason for that is that it is such a monumental pain in the butt. Now, we're going to show you how to make it much easier, and how Good Data in particular, because it has this analytics as code capability. When you combine it with LLMs and some LLM, basically LLM-driven programming techniques, you can interrogate the metadata, say in a Power BI dashboard, and automatically import that into Good Data's semantic layer. So we'll show you how to do that live. So tune in next week, January 28th, 9 a.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Central European. That makes it 12 here in Eastern time for that. And thank you to Good Data for sponsoring the show. All right, here we go. Are you ready? Here comes Colleen. Woo, Colleen.
Hey, hi.
Welcome to the Super Data Brothers show. It's nice to finally have you.
I know, what a treat. Finally I joined.
I mentioned in the intro, but I will just reiterate. I'm so glad you're here. I've been trying to have you on the show forever because, I think it was at Data Council last year somewhere. We were at a conference somewhere.
Yeah.
And we were just talking about kind of, career stuff and different places we had worked and what was good and what was bad. And we got into the topic of startup versus corporate and how different they are. And there's some obvious differences. There's the stereotypes. Startup is fast moving and you're going to work with really smart people and there's going to be a lot of chaos, but it'll be fun. And, corporate is slow and that's kind of true. But I wanted to bring you on to kind of give us the real talk about, your career story and comparing those two worlds so that people can make the right decision for them when they are faced with that choice. Do I go to the big company or do I go to the startup? So I'll just introduce yourself and let us know about your background.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so excited to finally be here. I feel like we've been chatting about this. I feel like it was last Data Council, but maybe even the one before.
It could have been the one before. Yeah.
In a while. Yeah. And I have been doing data for like 20 something years at this point. I have a PhD. And so I have a little of that academic experience too, from like, no guardrails, no money, and then going to startups where, there are usually fewer guardrails and a lot of money and then no money. And then it's all over the place. But like a lot of innovation, a lot of possibility, which is exciting. And then last year I made the move and now I am, senior director of data engineering at Capital One. And it has been a ride. I'm glad I went in the direction I did, but, and I like working at Capital One. It's been fun and I really enjoy it. I'm glad I work where I do and, it's been all good things, but it's definitely like an adjustment. Right. And the more I talk to people who are still in the startup scope, they're all like, tell me what the differences are. And some of them I knew would be there and some of them have been very shocking. So, it's been fun. It's been an interesting ride so far. So I'm happy to answer any questions and talk about my experiences.
Yeah. And if this is your first time here, Super Data Brothers is a live show. So ask your questions and we will discuss them on the air. We do have a hi from Aditya Gupta. Aditya, let us know where you're watching from. And so we can give your hometown a shout out too. And then we got a question. Is Good Data comparable to Microsoft Fabric? No, sort of. It's kind of it's like the presentation layer of Fabric. It's most comparable to Power BI, but it's really like if Power BI was more of a, like a development. It was one part BI tool and one part like software engineering and application suite is kind of the best way to describe Good Data. Check it out at gooddata.com. And thank you to Good Data again for sponsoring the show. Okay. So Colleen.
Yes.
First blush, what is the biggest difference between startup and corporate world?
It's hard to answer that, like the one thing, but the thing that I think surprised me the most, and I should have seen this coming because having been a management consultant for a few years, like I knew this. When I made the switch, a friend of mine said, "Oh, you're trading red flags for red tape." And I thought that was hilarious and very appropriate. Right. And, so I just thought that was really apropos. Right. And so I expected there to be a lot of like meetings about meetings. And, you see all the TikTok people and the reels about people making fun of the corporate life. Right. And so I knew some of that, but I think coming to a company like Capital One, it's been around, say, 30 years. And so there's 30 years of history. And so they've tried everything, they've done the decentralized data strategy and then they went to a centralized. Now we're going back to decentralized or whatever. And so it's just like these journeys are iconic in a lot of ways and like stuff of legends. But when you're at a startup and the company is 50 people and a year old, you don't have any history. You're building everything greenfield. And I'm so used to that coming in and being like, hey, I'm a new leader. I got some ideas. And they're like, yeah, we did that 3 years ago. It didn't work. And I'm like, oh, okay. What about this? And they're like, yeah, we did that 2 years ago and it didn't work. And so, or we did that and it worked, but we changed because, right? And so it's like, you've got incredibly smart people, you've got innovation, but you also have a scale that is just unfathomable, right? Like Capital One is the size of a small city, right? So it's just like I think my previous company was 800 people. Prior to that, my company that I joined a 50-person company a few companies back, right? And so it's just like I was the first engineering leader, whereas I come here and there are a lot of people with my title, right? Whereas I was like a field CTO at my previous company. So it was like, there were a couple of us. So it's the sheer scale and also the history.
Yeah. And that, talk to us a little bit about, was there an element of culture shock? Like you mentioned, you came in and you're like, okay, here's my ideas. And people had responses to that. I've worked at startups for the last 5 years and, quite typically it's like, oh, here's my idea. And they're like, okay, you have 2 weeks to try it. And then if it works, we'll keep going. Otherwise, we're going to change who we are as a company. Right. I mean, it's like, that tended to be what it's like. What was, how did that feel like at first when you walked in and you kind of ran into that?
I think the thing that I think of when you ask me this question is my onboarding period. And like, startups, you onboard, and especially as a leader, like there's no one to onboard you, right? Like there's the CEO or maybe the CTO or VP of whatever. And so you're like being onboarded by your peers, but there's no onboarding. Like you're defining the role as you come in because you're often the first person in that role. Whereas here, there's so much to learn and there are processes for everything. I mean, it's a bank, it's highly regulated. So like we have a risk organization, which, I started at one startup where I was like, hey, we should be like scanning our software. And they're like, ooh, good idea. Whereas, and so it's just like, it's so different. And some of this, I knew it would be there, but I don't think you can fathom it until you're in the situation, like how much organization it takes to move a ship that big. Right. And so it's like, it really is like steering a cargo ship instead of a speedboat in a lot of ways. And I mean, it's just different. It's not better or worse necessarily. In a lot of ways, it's better because there's a lot of guardrails, and you can't accidentally delete prod, for example. But like it's very different. Yeah.
Yeah, I got to give a couple shout outs here. So we've got friend of the show and future guest Ramona Truta in the audience. So thanks for joining us today, Ramona. Ramona's in Ontario. We're in Detroit, so I'm sure like outside down the other side of this wall is like a frozen tundra. I'm sure it's the same way for Ramona. And then we've got Oladameji. Welcome back. Good to see you again here. And then a couple questions. So, this is from Ramona. I think this is a great question, Ramona. Thank you for asking. How do you convince such a large enterprise that you can actually do the job when your background is in smaller places and startups?
I think that's a great question too. I think there's a few different angles I go in with. One is, let's talk about how I got the job, right? I was on a podcast. I don't even remember which one. Obviously not this one, but I was on a different podcast, and someone who I'm now honored to call a friend, Nisha, pinged me and was like, hey, I heard you on that podcast talking about data mesh. Like, I'm at Capital One. Do you want to chat about data mesh? And I was like, sure. I love talking about data mesh. So part of my experience at smaller companies was thinking about data strategy. And I was on the vendor side, on the data vendor side. So I did a lot of work, as a field CTO, I was really deep into strategy. And so I, would talk to Jamak about data mesh, or go to customers and talk to them about their data strategies. And so she and I spoke about that. And then she was like, oh, we're doing this at Capital One. Like we're data products first, right? We're very cutting edge in our data strategy. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. And I hadn't considered going to a corporate environment. And she was like, yeah, you should look at Capital One. And I was like, no, I could never work at a bank. Come on. So I I think the way in the interview process, especially, I convinced them that I could do the job is by showing them the work I had done, right? Like, obviously I've given talks and things like that and data council and whatnot. And so I was able to send them links. But on the other hand, like talking through the strategic work that I had done and the products that I had built and the customer experience that I had enabled with those products. So that was for me the way I did it. But I think you can always translate the work itself. Like the work is the same. You're building data pipelines, you're, building a BI environment, regardless of whether you're at a big company or a small company.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned the podcast to job pipeline. I know multiple people who that's worked out for. So
yeah,
that's how I got my job at Good Data.
Yep.
Oh, really? Oh, that's
Yeah.
Wait, your podcast or someone else's podcast?
It was my own personal podcast.
Yeah.
Led to a job that, like, got me on their radar, and then the CEO reached out to me on LinkedIn.
That's so cool. Yeah.
All right, we got some more questions. We got another question from Mooplad. So this is kind of coming from the other way. So I know the focus is on moving from startup to large corporation structure. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on going from academia setting to corporate as a new PhD in the job market.
Yeah, that is, and I'm sure you can speak to this too, Eric. Having done a PhD, I told everyone I didn't want to do software, which clearly I just need to say what I don't want to do, and then I'll end up doing it. That's my life. But
reverse manifestation.
I came out of grad school knowing a lot more than I thought I knew about computers, right? I have a PhD in astrophysics, and all I was doing in astrophysics, and this is a very long time ago because I'm ancient, but I was taking data from telescopes, huge data sets, and loading them onto my computer, doing a lot of computer admin stuff, and then wrangling that data, cleaning that data, and telling stories with that data. They happen to be about universes or galaxies instead of, business, but it really was data engineering and analytics. And so for me, I was able to sort of, as I researched companies, parlay that into a role in the data space, which back in the 2005 time range, this wasn't really a field. Like data engineering didn't exist per se, but it was becoming a thing. And I got really lucky that somebody like headhunted me and I didn't know what I was talking about. I was like, sure, I'll come in for an interview, and I ended up working there. But I do think that like going from academia to corporate, there are a lot of structures in place at large companies. Like we at Capital One, we have like programs for people coming out of college, for example. Like we have programs that train people in how to be a corporate person, right? And so in some ways, I wish I had known about those programs when I was graduating. I think that would have been really useful. But I think there are some of those structures, especially in the corporate world, less so in startups.
There's also, I think, your question about, well, how do I, go from academic to corporate as a PhD, as a new PhD in the job market, is a subset of a bigger question, which is like, how do I succeed in this job market period?
Yeah.
Which is a big question in data right now. I think, at Colleen's level, my level, Eric's level, I don't get the sense that the job market is too bad, but for people who are trying to get into it, it seems like it's quite challenging.
Yeah, I know. I know someone who got undergraduate in data science and was split between, well, if I can get a job, I'll get a job. If not, I'm going to go for their master's. Do you think they're going for their master's or not? Or do you think they have a job? They're going for their master's.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's just interesting to see you're right. That like, I think there is just a certain level of like friction and difficulty if you're just finishing college.
Yeah. It's a really hard market right now. So I very much feel for folks, and anytime I see or hear of openings, I'm always like trying to connect people just because, I believe in karma, but yeah.
Yeah, I do that too. I take probably 1 or 2 calls a month from someone who's just reaches out to me on LinkedIn and says, "Hey, I'm trying to break into the job market," and I always say yes to that. One guy in particular, he was kind of like, "Well, I think maybe I want this or I want that," and my advice was like, "Yes, think about where you will best fit." But my first piece of advice to you is like, take a job.
Yeah.
And don't say, like, if something's offered, don't say no to it because you think 3 years from now it doesn't 100% align with what you want. Like, you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And employment is better than unemployment in
Mhm.
most situations.
Yeah.
Mooplat follows up, especially on my end where I'm dependent on grant funding from the federal government.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, Eric can talk
Yeah.
about that a little bit. I don't know, Eric, what's the
Yeah.
grant
Yeah. Well, I
situation
work
like?
for a university, so this is major cuts in universities for all that sort of stuff. Like just like it's like for federal grant funding, and it affects like staffing at the university as well. Even if you're not funded by grants, cutting the grants affects your job availability. Like the university I'm at, there has been layoffs at the university I'm at. So it's just that's a true one, and that's a tough one.
Yeah, and even if the grants haven't been taken away, as far as I understand it, there's a lot of uncertainty because there's
Yes,
things that the
majorly.
administration will say, and you're like, I got my grant. Does that mean it's not going to be paid out in the future?
Yeah.
That kind of thing. And that's rough. I feel for folks in that situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We did it. So Alex says he asked a question on Substack. Now, I didn't see your question on Substack, Alex. So if you re-ask it on YouTube, or maybe try entering it in a Substack again if you're still watching over there, maybe then I'll see it. Fingers crossed. Okay, so corporate versus startup. There's a cultural difference. I think one thing people ask is, okay, what is, how does the pace of work differ and why?
Yeah. And I think there's this assumption that there's no innovation at larger companies and that everything's going to move slow and be painful. And, most of your days spent in meetings, not doing anything. And I think certain companies, that's absolutely true. My experience has not been like that at Capital One, which has been wonderful. There's a balance between innovation and regulation, right? Like you need to sort of balance you can't just be installing anything on a computer that's going to affect like reporting to an SEC, right? Like there's a lot of things that, common sense you can't do. And there are guardrails around a lot of those things. But that said, I've been vibe coding. I've been using AI, like I created an app the other day. And so it's like we do have that freedom and we do have that spirit of innovation. And there is a desire to move faster. And so a lot of the practices that I'm bringing from the startup world have been accepted and championed at the corporate, in the corporate sphere, which is really nice to hear. And I mean, it's really nice to see because I was concerned about that going in. I was like, is this going to be so slow that I can't handle it? And I mean, there are places where it's slow, sure. Like I have been in meetings about meetings and I just kind of chuckle to myself and I'm like, this would have happened at a startup too, but maybe there's a few more in corporate. But I do think that people overall are thoughtful and are aware of that stereotype. And, I do think it depends on the specific company too.
Yeah. Capital One, I mean, from the outside looking in, Capital One seems pretty fast moving and agile compared to, other companies and industries. A couple things. So Chris Tab says, yo, super data bros, and hi, Colleen.
Hey,
good to have you here,
Hey,
Chris.
Chris.
Chris, are you going to Austin this year for day to day? I haven't seen.
For deep freeze Austin.
Yeah, deep freeze Austin. Exactly. And then so Alex did come through with a question on YouTube. So let's talk about it. So here's the context setting. Alex is working at big tech and BI. He spotted some errors that had been there for years that potentially could lead to incorrect financial reporting. Okay, so that's the context. And his senior colleague suggested, stay consistent in the error. Have you ever faced a similar situation, and how did you face it? I have a story about this, but Colleen, let's start with you.
Okay, I certainly have stories about that, not for my current role, but definitely.
Yes, right. Yes, absolutely not.
Startup world, yeah.
Nothing like this at Capital One. Let's be absolutely clear.
Keep going. Yeah. It doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
We just need to go. But no, I mean, I that would never fly where I am now. I mean, that's illegal, right? Like that would literally. Well, I don't know if it's illegal or we have compliance people that you can talk to and be like, hey, I found this thing. But, one of our maxims is to do the right thing, right? Like, and that's what we talk about all the time is doing the right thing and making sure that we're doing right by our customers. And so that wouldn't fly where I am now. That said, there's a reason I'm not a management consultant. And it's largely because the more senior I got in management consulting, the more it was in sales and it was less like hands-on, and I didn't enjoy that. But one time I did have someone tell me, this is a crazy story. They basically were like, I don't like the way that line I need a scatter plot. And I like made them a scatter plot with a line through it. And they were like, yeah, take away all the points that are really far away from the line, because it doesn't look good. And I'm like, then why are we using data? Like, that's just a drawing. And I got in a fight with this person, and I was just like, maybe this isn't right for me. And it was a low stakes situation. It wasn't like reporting to the SEC or something, but it's one of those things where it was just like, there's a line I won't cross. Right. And so, I want to work at a company that shares those ideals. And so, one of the things that attracted me to my specific role right now is that, Capital One, we like to say we're a data and tech company that happens to be a bank, right? Like, we're all about the data and the tech. So,
there's a cultural thing too, right? Like, I think the culture of a lot of startups, and Alex, you were in big tech. I mean, the culture of big tech is, the famous move fast and break things, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lying's a little bit okay.
It's a little bit okay, right? Like, as long as at the end, if our options pay out, then who's going to question what we did 3 years ago?
Yeah, absolutely.
My story about this is in a corporate setting. It was earlier on in my career, and I was working at a place. I was on the BI team. So, Alex, it was a similar situation. And we had a report that went to the board, and it was the IT dashboard. And I got put in charge of making the IT dashboard. And I built it off of the enterprise data warehouse. And when I produced it, the CIO, essentially, maybe he's the IT director, and he was functionally the CIO. He came to me and said, hey, this report shows that we're like 9% over budget, year to date. And I was like, correct. And he was like, well, listen, we know that by the end of the year, we're going to be under budget. We know that. So there's no reason to tell the board that we're over budget in April, right? So here's a spreadsheet. I want you to change where the dashboard points from the enterprise data warehouse to the spreadsheet. And from now on, every month, you're going to make the IT dashboard off of the spreadsheet. And, what could I do? I mean, it's like I didn't quit on the spot, but that started a very quick a series of events that led to me finding a new job.
Yeah,
is how I dealt with that. And I do look back on that. Like, should I have just refused to do it? I don't know. Maybe
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I definitely caused strife by refusing to do it when it was my turn to have that situation, right?
Yeah.
Like, I got in a fight with someone about it, and I was like, this is ridiculous. But I think that speaks a lot to the culture of the company, though. And it's like, the culture is just made up of the people. And so it's like, when you're interviewing, these are such hard things to interview for, right? And it's like, I don't like to talk about culture fit, because I think if you really do that, you end up with like a very homogenous organization. But I instead like to talk about values alignment and making sure that organizations value the same things I do, right? Are they just in it for sales at all costs? Are they in it to do the right thing by their customers? Are they in it, to do the right, whatever the board asks, right? Like, what is the balance between those? And especially in leadership, you need to be understanding that balance for the other leaders that you're going to be working with.
Yeah, a couple comments here. So Chris says, in his experience, he's found that you can learn skills from startups that can help in enterprise companies and vice versa. So get experience from both.
Yeah.
And I think I want to return to this in a second. We'll read a couple more comments here. Ramona says, when you know the data, you can make it tell whatever story you want, unfortunately.
Yeah.
This is very true. And then Alex says, thank you for sharing. In my experience, it was more about individuals wanting to look successful rather than a total company culture. So that's good, right? It wasn't pervasive. It was maybe just some of the people you were dealing with. And then you left the company after the last episode. They didn't need you anyway. Good. I mean, it's definitely a get out of there situation. So I want to return this thing from Chris. Do you think coming from startup to corporate, is there almost a way to position yourself? Like, hey, my startup experience gives me fresh ideas or like a perspective that you might want in corporate? Can that be viewed as an advantage?
I think it can. I think the corporate desires to move faster, right? And so coming from a startup, I do think you have skills to know how to prioritize things to move faster. And, building MVPs is in the blood of a startup, right? And that's something that's maybe not as pervasive in all corporate environments. But that said, I think the thing that I loved about startups, and I thought I would miss it, and I don't because I still get to do it, is that in startups, I wasn't just engineering. I wasn't just data. I was marketing and sales and product and all of these different things, right? And I was, an exec team, and I got to do all of these different things and people leadership. And, it was one of those things when I got to corporate that, I'm building a data platform, right? Like we have an internal data platform that I work on, and I own a piece of that. And, I think it's a critical piece of it, and I really enjoy what I'm building. But, a lot of corporate life is about influence. And, just because I don't know everyone at the company like you do when you're at a 100% company, you can work on expanding your sphere of influence, but you're selling your product to your customers who happen to be in the same company, right? And so it's like I'm still using those marketing skills, those sales skills, the product skills, and like I'm able to leverage and influence my teams the same way I did. So like absolutely those skills are, they're used differently, but it's definitely still similar.
Colleen, I think this is such great advice because many people think about their corporate job as just being one thing, I've found, right? And you increasingly need to think about how you market your work within, even if you work at a big company, right? Mm-hmm. Who are your customers? Because when you work in technology, even if you're say you're on a BI team and all you do is make reports for people inside the organization, they are your customers, and they can choose to use your reports, or they can choose to do it in Excel, or they can choose to go out and buy some self-service BI tool and run around you ultimately. Yeah. And so you need to market to them. You need to think about the product portfolio you're providing. I just think that's great advice. Well, quick thing from Aaron here. He says, Aaron, Ryan, please don't admit to committing fraud on your show. Plead the fifth when needed. This was a long time ago, Aaron. I was very young. Okay, very young.
Saying the statute of limitations has expired is what you're saying.
It has expired, right? It's expired. I cannot be brought into a court of law for this. We got the GOAT, Michael Dunphy, back. Good to have you, Michael. Colleen, Michael is the one guy who attends every episode of the Super Data Brothers show.
Super fan.
He's a super fan. Michael, we did a new run of T-shirts. So why don't you let us know where you live, and I'll send you one. Give us your address and size. Nice. So he asks, do you feel that going to a startup honed your skill set working on a wide range of things that the company needs versus a large corporation being more specialized and narrow focus? I think you kind of addressed this in your last answer, but
I did. And I would. Oh, is that a person?
Yeah, that's Juniper. She's my 4-year-old. Hey, June, do you want to come say hi? She's gone. Okay. Anyway, sorry, Colleen.
No, I was just going to say, we did touch on this. And I would say that even in the large corporation, you still have the opportunities. Capital One is so big, we have internal conferences, right? And I've spoken at the internal conferences. And so it's there are a lot of resources you wouldn't get at a startup, and you need to go external for at a startup that we have internally at a large company. And I'm speaking about an F100 company, but I think that's true at a lot of these corporations.
Yeah.
It's distracted by Juniper. She's adorable.
She is very adorable. Hey, Juju, can you shut the door? Thank you. It's a kid-friendly show, except for when you talk about fraud. That's been my experience too. It's amazing that they have their own conferences, but it makes sense.
Oh yeah, they're huge. It's great. It's so cool. You hear all about what's happening across the organization, and we're doing some really cutting edge things. So it's really fun.
Yeah. And Ramona says it's impressive that Capital One allows Colleen to talk on podcasts. So I want to thank Capital One for allowing Colleen to come on the show.
I'll let our CEO know.
now that you've acquired Discover, I'm a happy customer. And so, way to go.
Yeah, that's been exciting. Yeah.
And when I saw that, I was like, no way.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, it's different though, because I will say at a startup or in academia, they don't care. In a startup, they're like, please go on all the podcasts. We need to get our name out there. No one's heard of our product or our company or any of us, right? And so that's like part of my job at a startup. Whereas here, obviously this is a fun way to chat with friends and I enjoy doing these things. And, I think it's a good recruiting tool, but it's also one of those things where I did have to run it by them. I did have to say, hey, I'm going on this podcast. Is this okay? And they said, sure. Because,
Capital One is using Jennifer Garner to get their name out there, right? So they don't need people like you and I to go on a small data podcast.
Yeah. They don't need me.
Eric, why don't you read this question from Alex that he dropped in?
All right, Alex, with another good question. So let me put the elephant in the room. What about the third way to do both, corp startup and even more, as a freelance? Get the best or worst of all worlds.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't personally, I've done some freelance over the years, but not a lot. So I don't know that I can speak to that, but it seems like, you would get both the best and the worst.
I did freelance for about 6 months.
Yeah.
And you learn a lot about yourself, I would say.
Yeah.
What did you learn?
It was just like there's, when you're your own business, like there's a lot of really boring stuff that goes into running a business that other people do for you when you're employed that now you have to do for yourself, like remembering to send the invoice and when they following up when you don't get paid and following up again when you don't get paid and, keeping track of stuff for taxes. And there's a lot to it. It was fun. I will say it was fun. I did so like within a 6-month period, I was doing this show. I was advising mid-sized startup in like a kind of a 20-hour-a-week capacity. I was doing a data warehouse. I was designing a data warehouse for the Texas Association of Counties, and I was writing freelance articles for vendors. So it was fun. Like that was cool. I was doing technical work. I was doing advisory work. I was doing creative work. It's the most I've ever made in a 6-month period. It was also stressful, and I could tell it was going great, but it was easy to see that there would also be periods where it's like, I didn't make any money this month. So that was kind of my experience with it. I've thought about doing it again, but you saw Juniper, right? When you have a 4-year-old, it's hard to embrace the chaos of freelancing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's also.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say there's also the fourth related way to freelance, which is work for a consulting company. Then you get to work with all the different companies and do projects, but you don't have to worry about the billing yourself. So.
Yeah.
I find that the hard thing about working for a consulting firm is inevitably someone messes up and you see the amount they're charging for you. And then you compare that to the amount you get paid, and then you get
and you're just like,
I knew those numbers, and I knew what they were charging for me and what I got paid, and there was a large discrepancy.
There's a very large difference
for a while, and it's fun. You get to work on like such cool projects, right? Like I worked on some really amazing projects, but there were some projects that I would be like, this is amazing. And in the end, we didn't get the contract, or you just move on. And it's like, after a few years, I definitely wanted to own things end to end and like actually see them through. And so that's just my personality. Like, I think it kind of depends. Are you okay with that? Like, does your family life support sort of the uncertainty of as freelance, or do you want, benefits and healthcare and things like that? And, do you want to travel? There's a lot of travel in consulting too.
Yes, there is. Yeah, that's a big piece of it. You mentioned, like benefits and healthcare. How does that compare? Let's just talk about like some of the nuts and bolts stuff, right? About startup world versus corporate. Well, one thing I'm intrigued by is getting stock compensation that's actually worth something.
Yeah,
because that's not something I've ever experienced at a startup.
I know, neither had I. And I was like, what do you mean it has value? Like, when? Like,
yeah, exactly. When?
What do you
mean?
Now. It's shocking. Yeah. It's like you have to like relearn all of that, right? Because it's like I was so steeped in the equity game. And so I knew like I had D round, E round, B round shares, and they're, this is the strike price, this is the grant price, blah, blah, blah. And so it's like you need to know all of that. And a lot of people don't know how that works in a startup. So if you work at a startup and you don't know how it works, like figure it out, because it's a big part of your compensation and it's fake money. Like it could be worth nothing in the end. And I know a lot of people who have lost money in startups, being in corporate, it's like, it's stock and you can see the value of it. And it's like, it's just a different game. And the benefits are obviously better, right? Like, I don't think that's a shock to anyone. The benefits are going to be better at a larger company just because there's a larger pool of people. But, it's just like, it's easier to calculate these things too in a corporate world. Like, whereas, a lot of the startup world is built off this idea of valuations, which are totally fake. Right.
Yeah.
So, I don't think that's controversial. I think that's pretty self.
Yeah. I mean, it's all made up.
Yeah.
If you've never worked at a startup, what's going to happen when you get hired is you're going to get this offer letter and it's going to contain, an options package, and the total value of the options package on paper might be really impressive.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But you just have to keep in mind that, it's like owning a penny stock that you think is going to go to the moon, right? Like, like sure, maybe, but people have gotten super rich in startup. Lots of people have, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But you need to be realistic about the odds. And what I always do, Colleen, is whatever that options package is, I just cross it out of my mind and I write 0.
Same. And it's like, that's tough though, because your comp at a company like that versus a big tech company or corporate or even academia is going to be less because of that. And it's like the upside is huge, but it's also, like I said, fake money until it's real. Right.
Yeah.
And so I know plenty of people who have lost money too. And so it's like 9 out of 10 startups fail or something like that. So,
and it's an enormous amount of work. And like the opportunity cost is, maybe you could have been making, a big tech, maybe you'd be making, even double what you would make at a small startup. And even in the corporate world, your total compensation package, which includes, that's apparently Gimli says hello.
Gimli?
Yeah. The door to the house is like right over there. So
I see.
I think that's his first appearance on the show.
Really?
Yeah. I think
cool.
he's just an unnamed dog off to the side. What was I saying? Oh, your total compensation package, when you cross out options, might be lowest at a startup.
Yeah.
And so
that's although academia is.
No, that's where it's low. Yeah. Tom says 0-2 on his end.
Yeah.
And he did the same as me in terms of counting as 0 in my budget.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't so far. I'm 0 for 2 as well.
And I mean, honestly, the odds of it being a little bit of money are fairly good, but the odds of it being like, life-changing money, so small, right?
Yeah.
Like it's a step in your career and you have to think of it that way. And I mean, I love working at startups, right? Like I learned so much. I was able to really grow, and I saw all the different stages of leadership from 0 to 1, and it was wonderful. I was ready for a new challenge, and corporate fit my life. But I do think that, the comp is rough.
Yeah.
Fake money thing is weird. And I think, like I said, I think a lot of people don't understand how it works.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's when it sounds cool at a party to say, I've got options worth 1.7 million. And it's like, those are options.
Billion stock options.
Yeah.
They're worth $0.
Michael says Gimli like Lord of the Rings. Yes, 100%. I'm yeah, of course. So Ramona says there are also lessons that can only be learned in those environments, just as Chris said. So I mean, that's that's true. And as someone who, I've done all three. Like I'm in the same boat as you, Colleen. Insofar as I've done consulting, I've done corporate, I've done startup, and I think I learned something really valuable in each place that increases my value in the others, right? Because there's something that each of those 3 points does that the others want.
Yeah.
And so when you kind of bring that to the table, it's pretty useful. Michael asks, so what's something you considered when choosing to work for a startup versus a large corporation that isn't usually mentioned?
That's a really good question. I think, I touched on this early on, like the historical context of an F1 30-year-old company or 100-year-old company or whatever it is going to be so incredibly different than a startup. And I think that's something that, I academically knew that, but, being in it is very different. It's just a different sort of puzzle that you have to figure out. And so I'm all for it. I like it. It's fun to figure these things out, but it's something that it didn't cross my mind. And I think that the other thing is that in startups, there's a lot of talk in startups about culture and, what we value. Every startup has their like poster with their values on it. And I find that most companies don't actually have the actions to back up those values. They're aspirational, and that's fine. It's just, I think you can't say, well, you said these are the values. Whereas in a corporate culture, it's actually measured. Like these are the things that we say. Like we say we want people to live the values. We want people to do the right thing. We want people to be creative technologists. We want people to, champion open source technology, like whatever it is. I'm just making them up. But like they actually measure those things, right? Like we have performance reviews. I know that's crazy. Shocking. But we have like performance reviews that actually like touch on these things and measure, and like we're thoughtful about them, which I appreciate. I think that's really valuable. And so it's like, we're very intentional about our culture, which I really like. So.
And then Tom here says, agreed on the lessons learned, wouldn't do it differently despite the lack of life-changing money. He learned so much, especially at the first startup, that he could not have replicated
Absolutely.
In the corporate world. And then Ramona chimes in, there are lessons to be learned in academia that can only be learned there, especially when teaching undergrads.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, that's, well, we'll have to talk about that when you come on the show at the end of the season too, Ramona, because that's something I'm interested in. One of my, like, if one of these startups had ever hit, like one of my ideas was to go and just teach, see if I could teach some data related course at the local community college as like, something for fun, really. It hasn't happened yet.
Yeah. I teach on O'Reilly and I've taught some courses, but I also taught in graduate school. I mean, it was physics, not data, but like the energy of teaching undergrads is so great. I loved it. I really loved it. And I would recommend anyone who can give it a try.
And Alex says, gotta leave. We'll watch the recording. Thank you. That was very refreshing and mentally healthy to join this live. All right. I'm glad. So we shoot for here on the show, mental health.
That's the goal.
Yeah.
Reminder, if anyone watching, like and subscribe if you haven't. That stuff does matter. So youtube.com/superdata brothers.
If you only watch us on LinkedIn too, jump over to the YouTube channel. The whole back catalog is there. I get asked all the time, like, oh, I can't make the show. Is there some way to watch it? It's like, yeah, they're all on YouTube.
Yes.
You can go back now 3 years and watch Super Data Brothers shows. So go check it out there. Colleen, we've got about 10 minutes left. I do have to ask you, you're not the first person who's been on the show who has made a move from something related to physics into data. So what was your journey like?
Yes. And it's funny because I lead an organization and I just found out yesterday that somebody who works in my org has a PhD in electrical engineering, but like the physics side of electrical engineering. And I was like, dude, we could have been calling each other doctor all this time. So shout out to him. But yeah, and there's another PhD on in physics on my team too. So there's a lot of us. And I think there aren't that many jobs in physics proper, right? And like, I was an observational astrophysicist. There aren't that many jobs out there for that. Most colleges and universities have an astrophysicist, right? And if that person's not retiring or, leaving for some other reason, there's no job opening. And so when I graduated, I wanted to stay in academia, but I didn't know if I wanted to do research. I knew I wanted to live in Boston, which is expensive. And so I was like, I'm going to have to figure something out. And I looked for academic jobs and I thought about postdocs, but the market wasn't that great at the time. And you also can't choose where you live. So I kind of started branching out and just looking at job descriptions. And this was 2005. So people looked, I'm not even making this up, on Craigslist for jobs back then. And somebody sent me a job listing and was like, hey, I had my resume on my website, which was like a web 1.0 site that I had made in grad school. And he was like, I saw your resume on your website. I'd love to invite you in. Here's my Craigslist ad. And that was cool back then. I know. The world has changed. But I didn't have anything better to do. So I was like, sure. And I went in for an interview and I ended up working at that company for 7 years. It was great. It was Ab Initio, and it's, still a wonderful company. Right. Yeah. And so I fell into this job 100%, but that said, I think the reason they were recruiting PhDs in physics is because we have a lot of computer knowledge. We understand data innately, especially if you've been on the experimental side, but even on the theoretical side. And we love solving hard problems, right? Like, we're really into solving really hard problems. Like, we love sitting down and noodling with some data and trying to figure out what story it's telling. And that's really what data is, right?
Was there like I'm always curious when people make these big changes, like, hey, I studied this thing. You went all the way through to a PhD. Mm-hmm. Was there a hesitance or some kind of, like, what did it feel like when you said, you know what, actually, I'm not going to do that. Like, I'm instead going to go and get into data. Cause my background, I studied acting and playwriting. And when I made the decision that, like, I was giving up trying to make money with that, like, that actually was quite hard.
It is hard. And I mean, a part of me still loves science and space. And I mean, my 7-year-old is studying phases of the moon in school. And I'm like, my time has come, right? Here I am. I'm going to help you with this. And, my 11-year-old, I love helping him with his algebra homework. It's like, brings me life. I love doing algebra. But, it's one of those things where, like, I had to balance, what do I want from a career with what do I want from, what did I like about physics, right? And what I liked was solving hard problems, talking to interesting people about deeply technical work and, being collaborative and communicating and coming up with the story and all of those things, which was what the PhD was, right? And so, I still get to sit down and think through hard problems, and I still get to do all those things. It's just different. And so it was hard for me to make the switch. Like, that's a really good question. But looking back, if I could go back and tell myself that, I would think about the things that really brought me joy and really, like, drove me to enjoy physics, and say, you can get these in other arenas. It doesn't have to be academia. It doesn't have to be research. And nobody told me back then. There was barely an internet back then. But
I mean, you found a job on Craigslist. I know.
I did. I know. And I found my apartment on Craigslist. Like, my whole life came from Craigslist back then.
I found an apartment on Craigslist. I've sold and bought cars on Craigslist. Yeah. I
think people underestimate the hold that Craigslist had on us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Ramona mentions Shantona, who will come back. Yes, in fact, Shantona did study as a PhD in physics, and it's like you're running the show for me, Ramona. Next week's guest is coming back to the show is Shantona Tully. So she's coming on to talk about, she made this switch too, actually, going from Upsolver to working at Unity. Yep. And so she's kind of going to come on and talk about what she's learned there, what it's like actually running the data platform from the side of the data platform customer versus the data platform vendor, and that sort of thing. So I think Shantona holds the record for most appearances on our show, actually.
Nice.
Yeah. She's more than Aaron?
I think she's been on more than Aaron. Yeah.
Yeah. I think
both
you're right.
Good guests, though. Very good guests.
Yeah. We have quite a roster of guests. I look at it sometimes. I'm like, damn, we have cool friends. All right, so we got 5 minutes left. We're going to wrap things up. I want to thank you all for sticking with us for this hour, especially you, Colleen, for the awesome insight into kind of your career transitions and what's been good about both sides. But before we go, of course, we got to thank Good Data, our sponsor. So next week, January 28th, join me and a few guests to talk about the path from legacy BI to AI ready analytics. And this is really focused on solving one of the biggest problems in BI, which is I'm sick of my BI tool, but getting off of it is too big of a pain. And so I'm just going to stay with it forever. This is like your incumbent BI vendor's biggest weapon. How do they keep getting you to sign that renewal that you don't want to sign? It's because converting all those dashboards is too painful. Well, we're going to show you how modern tools like Good Data with approaches like analytics as code make it easier for you to get off of that legacy BI tool by automating the migration, right? So look at your dashboard specification in Cognos, and then translate that to metrics layer metrics and front-end objects within Good Data using AI. This is going to blow your mind, so make sure you attend next week, January 28th, 9 o'clock Pacific, 12 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Central European time. So look forward to seeing you there. Ramona says, thank you for the conversation in the same blizzard. Yes, we are definitely getting walloped by the same snow right now. All right. So, Colleen, we just have a couple of minutes left. I want to ask you one last question, and that is, for someone looking to enter the data industry today, what piece of advice do you have for them?
I mean, I do think there are the hard skills you need, but I think that in data in particular, the soft skills are critical. And when I hire people, I'm hiring them because they can GSD, get stuff done, build things. And then I'm also hiring them because they're collaborative and they can communicate. And so I think communication is underrated in a lot of the technical fields, but I think in data in particular, it's all about telling the story of the company and answering questions and using data to get value. And that's all communication. And so whether it's written, knowing how to build a deck, especially at the leadership levels, that's where it comes in handy. But at all levels, even in Slack, knowing how to communicate well and clearly and succinctly and all those things is something I'm looking for. So if you're looking for a job, work on all of those skills.
Yeah, that amen. That's I think the thing that has helped me the most in my career is that stuff more than anything.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, Ryan, what was the top data book of 2025?
How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Yes, I think it was also the top data book of 2024, and I think it's in the run-in for 2026 as well.
Yes, yeah, it really is.
Really
You'd be amazed how much it will help you having those skills. All right, Colleen, where can people keep up with you?
I'm on LinkedIn. Just look me up. I'm the only one with my name, so it's pretty straightforward. Or Colleen Tartow at CapitalOne.com.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us this week, Colleen.
Thanks for having me. This has been fun.
Bye.
Thank you.
All right. Like, comment, subscribe.
Yep.
All the good stuff. Go to the Substack. Subscribe to the Substack, superdatablog.substack.com. If you are going to be at Day to Day Texas, come and say hello to us. We will be there, assuming our flights take off.
Yes.
And this Day to Day Texas final edition. You don't want to miss it. All right. Next week, Shantona Tilley making her, 5th appearance on the Super Data Brothers show.
Yeah.
But we're always happy to have her. She's awesome. You don't want to miss it. So, anything else, Eric? I think they're covered.
I think you covered it.
All right. Well, listen, folks, until next week, I am Ryan.
I am Eric.
And we are the Super Data Brothers. Stay warm this weekend, folks.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you.